Well, hello friends, David Vos here. It's a beautiful day here in Oklahoma, as you can see. The sun is out. It was real cold last night, got down to about, I think, 27 degrees or something. And that's kind of cold for around here. But it wasn't bad, it's warming up now. Well, we're about to go into a new year. It's going to look pretty weird writing 2020 on your checks, and well, you know, I don't write checks, but you know, just trying to get used to this idea that we're in the year 2020. Pretty weird. Well, friends, I was thinking about a few things today. Some very odd things I want to go over with you, because you know, we believe everything we're told. And there's some things that's not matching up. Just not matching up. We're told that Donald Trump, according to Forbes magazine, has $3-point-something billion. 3-point-something. But then we're told that other people have like 50 billion and 100 billion and 120 billion. And so Donald Trump's just not very rich. Well, I wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. We don't have any idea how much money these people have. But I got a question for you. How much do you think the Empire State Building is worth? Well, it seemed like it would be pretty expensive. I heard that the World Trade Centers were worth like $4 billion or something. So that's like $1 or $2 billion each, you know. The guy Silverberg bought them. He insured them for $4 billion before, just weeks before they went down. So I don't know how much one of those buildings cost, but I know they're expensive. And it turns out that Trump's got these buildings all over the world, and these kinds of buildings. He owns them in Chicago and New York and other places all around the world. London. And, you know, we hear about the Trump Tower. I think it's what is it, 52 stories or 53 stories? But there's also the Trump Plaza. There's the, you know, what's really odd, I talked about this in one of my videos some time ago, but when the United States got going, remember, all the world lived in Europe. The ruling power was over there in Italy and London and stuff for a long time, and Germany. The other countries were third world countries at that point, you know, during the 20th century. And so the Rockefellers, you know, Rockefeller Plaza, right there in Manhattan, which is just not too far, just a couple of streets down from the Trump Tower. But the Rockefeller building got there because that man was the richest, practically the richest man in the world. Well, he got rich, you know, by selling oil. Exxon Mobil and Shell and stuff like that. So we know how he got rich, had a lot of money, was able to buy a big old tower. But originally, the richest man had all the money and all the financing. They came over and they lived in New York City, of course, because that was called the Empire State. And the richest guy in the world, I think his name was, I'm not sure now what his name was. It's a name we don't hear very often. It's not it wasn't like Mr. Rothschild or anything. It was just one of his relatives. They were doing business with several different families. But they kind of made their headquarters. I mean, this is something that they had always done. That the richest guy in the world, or the richest family, would own the biggest building. You'd have the largest manor, and everybody else was a slave. So when they came over here, they started to make the United States their headquarters. I mean, they had made, they had been at the Vatican for a long time. They went to London, different places. Berlin, but then they had World War II, and that kind of screwed that up. But they finally moved their headquarters over here to the United States. Now remember, the Vatican is called the Vatican City. The whole city is just another country. It does not part of Italy. Italy doesn't own it. It's its own country. And they make their own laws. And basically it's a city that rules over the other people in the world. Right? The whore that rides the beast. She reigns over the governments. The 7 heads and the 10 horns of the beast. Well, London is the same thing. And this is where they started producing all these lawyers and all this stuff that we have today. When they came to America and they made the Constitution, it was a place of freedom. Certain individuals that were trying to get out of the system, give us liberty and justice for all, and blah, 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 blah. So, same year, 1776, the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, in 1776 created the Illuminati. It was a Jesuit order under the Catholic Church designed to infiltrate the Freemasons. Because they came over here, these darn Masons that were being murdered over in the Dark Ages, they came over to America, and Washington and, certain ones like Jefferson and stuff, they made a constitution and freed us. They gave us liberty, justice, freedom for all, inalienable rights. So they had to infiltrate. So they couldn't take away our constitution. They couldn't just grab it and rip it up. I mean, they had to figure some way to get around it. We were free. So at this point, all we had was our freedom. I mean, that was a lot. But now you got to ask yourself, all right, you're free, are you? Well, where are you going to live? Well, I'm going to go over here and get some land and live on the land. Oh, wait a minute now. Wait. You can do that. We'll give you some acreage for free and a mule. You go out there and work the land. But then what are you going to do with your land? What are you going to do with all the corn and all the cattle that you're going to be? Well, you need to sell that stuff, don't you? Okay, well, they tell you what, you come over here and you sell it to us, and we'll be the middle guy. We'll start a system. So they incorporated Washington, D.C., 100 square miles of land, and it became a corporation. And they elected a president over the corporation called the United States of America. Different than the little letters, United States of America. This is all capitalized. And they write it in all capitals. United States of America, which is the president is elected in this country or this corporation called Washington, D.C. Now, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin were lawyers for the crown. So they infiltrated our founding fathers and negotiated this deal whereby we could continue to keep our Constitution. However, their corporation could do business over here. And slowly the corporation took us over. And in 1870, they incorporated it. And from that time forward, they started making it compulsory to have a birth certificate. This way they could know who you were. You signed up. You registered on a bill. It's an actual, just looks like a dollar bill. It's got the same kind of squiggly writing around the edge of it. And if you look on your birth certificate, it says it's an actual bond. A bond. See, all these words go back to Old English, so you don't know. It literally means to be in bondage, to be bound by a contract. You say, oh, I'm bound by a contract. I can't do that. Do you know what you're saying? You are a slave. When you sign it, you're bound. You're bound to that contract. Remember Moses? He says, this is his law. Will you do it? And you said yes, and you signed, and you ratified a covenant. No, Jesus couldn't do away with the covenant that you signed. You signed it, but you can make a choice because maybe you signed it in duress. Jesus said, he's a liar. You don't have to. Come and follow me. I'll repurchase you. We're going to do this legal, right? Jesus paid the price. Okay, we don't get into how he did all that. We've done it in many videos. But now, stay with me because we're going to get to some very, very important things. So they come over here, and the richest guy that was over here at the time, sent over by the crown, early on, before the year 1800 and on into the 1800s and 1900s, they sent people over here to do business and to lure us into buying their products. And then they eventually got taxation in 1913. Oh, that was one of the first hurdles that they had to get over to enslave us. And the birth certificate was another. But citizenship, you see, you didn't have to have a birth certificate before. They didn't need to see your papers. Let me see your papers, it's the Gestapo. You've got to show us your papers. Well, you didn't have to do that in 1776. All men, regardless of who you were, you didn't have to be a citizen. All men were created equal. See how things have changed. They didn't have to see your papers. You weren't stopped at the corner. We're under martial law. We've been under martial law since 1870 because, you see, President Lincoln put us under martial law in the Civil War, and then they murdered him, and he never did rescind it. Now, the only way they can keep it going legally is to always have to be in a war. So every 2 years, they have to declare some kind of war. So every 2 years, they declare a war on something. A war on drugs, a war on the sick, or war on cancer, or the war on terrorism, or something. We've been in a terrorist war now for 30 years. This is how they continue on martial law. They say, well, martial law means that we're under military law. Yeah, we are. You see the cops on every corner? That's the military. It's just another word. Police. In 1870, after the Civil War was over, they let the slaves go, and they had to patrol the slaves. They called them slave patrol. And now we call them police. But anyway, that's, along with all the Jim Crow laws and everything else, they just simply let the slaves go and enslave them by making them sign willingly. See, he said, hey, we'll offer you some good stuff, some wages and some stipends. We'll make a contract with you. Sign this birth certificate. You get to be a citizen, brother. Well, that comes with a lot of problems, because now you have some rights. You get your wages and stipends, maybe a little welfare money, but you also have, you're now a willing slave, because the 14th Amendment says that you are bound by all of the punishments and the penalties and the laws of the state. That's what you do when you sign. It doesn't mean you're signing, oh, I get free citizenship. No, you get to be a slave. You sign a contract that says you're bound by the law. And they get to make the law, not you. So they're just like any marriage covenant, which is and then you get a bill of divorce, like a dollar bill. Remember the paper bulls? That just means a paper bill. That's how you make contracts. And everything that you see, like money, what is that? It's not gold. No, it's a contract. It says I owe you. So everything that's written on bond paper is a contract. A binding, a bond. It's a binding contract. So yes, I guarantee you're bound. All right. So these rich guys, they start doing all this business. They get us enslaved. Well, you see, this was their empire. That's why they called it the Empire State. And the tallest building that they built was called the Empire State Building. Now, in traditional practice, these very powerful people, they give this property to their heir. So, for instance, when Rothschild passed away, when Grandpa Rothschild passed away, he gave all of his money to his children, and they were his heirs, and so they've carried down his money. By now, they've got so much money, they don't even know how to count it all. It's not even counted. We don't know. It's in the trillions. It's on an offshore account somewhere, or it's, in a bunker somewhere, in big gold bars. Remember, they confiscated all of the gold all around the world in the 30s and different times. They confiscated all of our gold. They got the rest of it in the 70s, and that was it. We don't got no more gold. There's no gold standard, but they took all that gold somewhere. Just before World War II, they started taking most of it. And, some of it's in a building in Switzerland. But, we don't know where it all is. So, they built the Empire State Building. That was their estate. That was the richest person over here. That was their empire. And they only give that building, they hand it on to their kids. Well, here's what's interesting. Donald Trump bought the Empire State Building. He did sell it, but he did own it for a while. I think that's very interesting because it tells you something. You see, they don't sell those properties. They're not sold. Remember, I've told you many times. If you go across the Brooklyn Bridge, you'll see this big building called the Watchtower. Now, way back in 18, something, I don't know what year, Charles Taze Russell, he bought that building, so we're told. Now think about it. Some guy ends up starting a world religion, a new American-made, New Age religion. It was different than other Christian religions, and it wouldn't have gotten started by itself because it was foreign to what everybody believed at the time. They had to have misinformation, just like they started Hollywood. They started groups, organizations, propaganda, the media. The financiers had to do their work to get us control. So one of the things they did was start these new religions. Another one of them was the Moonies. Now think about this. The Watchtower is not bought and sold, or any building in New York or Brooklyn or any of that, the greatest port in the world, right? They don't buy and sell those pieces of real estate. They assign them. So you see, they had intended to have a world religion called Jehovah's Witnesses that would prepare the world for Zionism. Remember, Charles Taze Russell was a Zionist and related to the Rothschilds. There is documented proof of this. He wrote letters to the Rothschilds, and they were friends. They bounced ideas off of each other. He was one of his biggest proponents. Zionism. He had this magazine called The Watchtower, and it went all around the world. They sold more copies of The Watchtower than any other magazine that's ever been published. Did you know that? Did you know that their book called The Truth Book, and a couple of other their books, has reached sales that is greater than any other book that's ever been sold at that time? I think recently it's been surpassed by some other book like what is that magic book with the I can't even think of that kid that's like a wizard or whatever. But for a long time they held the spot And so it was, they couldn't have done that just because they were so smart or their ideas were so wonderful. They were financed, you see. It was pushed. It's like a sales pitch. Charles Taze Russell had a sales pitch. He had several of them. One of them was religion, a snare and a racket. See? And then he put it on banners and posters, and he hired people. Actually, originally Jehovah's Witnesses were hired. They paid them, and they went out on the street and stood up on the corner and sold these magazines, and they were little slogans like "Millions now living will never die" and these kinds of things. It was a promotional push. Charles Taze Russell, Pastor Russell puts the fires out in hell, because they didn't believe in hell. See, so these were the slogans. Now, so this was a big thing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize it, because today Jehovah's Witnesses aren't very big. They've kind of decreased. They're not growing much anymore. But they've gone from nothing in just a short while to become a major religion. But there was a time when, think about all the books and magazines that they published. They got this big Watchtower Tract Society. It's a big, huge printing facility. They printed more of their own particular New World Order Bibles. They printed millions and millions and saturated the world with their version of the Bible. It's propaganda. They scratched out that Jesus was God, and they replaced it and said it was just a God. They just took parts of the Bible out. They took John chapter 8 out of the Bible, which is the chapter that talks about the poor woman that was caught in adultery. Well, they don't like that part, so they took it out. They took out the part where it says there are three that bear witness, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They took out parts of the Bible, my friends. And this was financed by the Rothschilds. They used to have the Templar sign on all their pamphlets and books. The slanted cross and the crown, which is exactly the same Templar emblem that was put on Christian Science books. And it's the same symbol that you'll see in a Masonic temple. Charles Taze Russell admitted in speeches, you can go look it up on the internet, that he was a Freemason. He claimed to be a Freemason. His tomb is a great pyramid, and it is in a Freemasonic funeral or graveyard. Excuse me. It's funny because Charles Taze Russell actually died October the 31st on Halloween in a graveyard. Very, very odd. We don't know what he was doing, some kind of a ritual or something. But he's the one that brought back, with a fervor, brought back this idea that we got to serve the Old Testament God. Because, most Christians didn't really relate to the Old Testament. So, this is something. So, what I'm getting at is that they gave him that property, and right at the end of the Brooklyn Bridge, and across the street, you can see the UN building. From their watchtower, you can see the UN building. See, this is property allocated to these ideas of Zionism and world peace and world religion and world government. Right next to the Rockefeller Plaza, or building. And, guess what else is right across the street from the United Nations building, on the United Nations Plaza? It's actually the name of the street where the United Nations is. Like, think about just literally, virtually, exactly across the street from the headquarters of the United Nations is Trump Plaza. It's a very, very large building, like 70 stories or something like that. I don't remember exactly how many. Now, you think he only has $3 billion when he's got these huge skyscrapers all around the world? Now, he owned the Empire State Building. Remember, the Empire State Building was the tallest building in the world for, I think, 40 years. It was named after the Empire State, or New York. Now, another building that was named after New York and was owned also by this very powerful family was the Windheim or the New Yorker. The New Yorker building is where, guess who? Tesla. He lived there for, I don't remember how long Tesla lived in that building. On the I think it was the 33rd floor or something. But, and he had turned the whole building into some kind of a science thing. Like, he had a big generator. He was producing electricity. You know, he invented. Most of what we understand about electricity, this man invented. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. So, here's where Tesla is held up, inventing his stuff. The day he dies, his papers and all of his work and his scientific inventions, everything comes up missing, and we've never supposedly ever found it. Well, we found it. And you heard me talk about this. You can look all this up. But you see, the government went in there and took it. And the government is run by some very powerful people. Well, John Trump, which is Donald Trump's uncle, happens to be one of the most somehow chosen to be the one who's allowed to look over the papers of Nikola Tesla. And this is the most important work. They've been trying. The man was probably murdered, Tesla, so they could get that stuff. Because remember, they were trying to win the war. He died in 1943. The war wasn't over yet. It was a race to get his information. Because you see, what he was making was the internet, friends. Yeah, free electricity? No, people didn't understand what it was. It was a power. It looked like an antenna. And they were like, what is that? Some kind of a radio tower. It looked like a radio tower. Well, he was inventing the internet. And they knew they could control all men with this, if they could have this power. So, Tesla was stubborn, and he wouldn't give it to him. Not for no amount of money. Well, why didn't they kill him? Well, because they needed his knowledge. He had him in checkmate. So they didn't kill him until he finished what he was doing. And somehow they sent a spy in, and they found out, okay, he's got it, bro. All right, you can put him to death. We're going to go in there and seize all of his work. And don't worry, we've got a guy named John Trump that knows all about this stuff. He's almost as smart as Tesla, probably more intelligent, and he can figure out everything he's been, working on, and we'll take that and we'll make an internet and we'll control the world. We'll take everybody's minds. See, we're going to win World War II. Well, that's what won World War II. They took part of that information. They did the Philadelphia experiment. You probably heard about that, where they took and using Tesla's information, they made a big ship disappear in the harbor right there. Oh my goodness, it's like people just couldn't believe it. So they hushed that all up and took it off to Area 51 or whatever. And so we weren't allowed to find out what was going on. But meanwhile, they just took this information and they started putting satellites in the air, and you, the taxpayer, paid for it. All the oil that Rockefeller used, right, is our resources, but he made all the money off of it. We did all the work. Okay, with our tax money, we put the satellites in the air, and then they just gave it to a little company called Google. And little Google eyes are looking at you no matter where you are, what you do. Okay, it's just a monitoring system. It's a way to sort of build a bubble around us so we'll be completely controlled for eternity. We've got very little time to warn people, because once the dome goes up, and that, and so what is that? What is that actually? Well, it's almost up, and when we're using it now, but there's still a way out. We could still stop it. Perhaps what they're going to do that'll make it so that there's no more way out. It's probably this thing they're calling 5G. So we better be really careful about that. But anyway, I digress. Well, so right there in central mid-Manhattan, that's what they call that area. mid-Manhattan. There are these big towers. The Empire State Building, right on 5th Avenue, and down the street about 2 blocks is Trump Tower on 5th Avenue. And over just a jot and a jig, there is the United Nations, there is the Rockefeller Tower and Plaza, there is the Watchtower Society. Now guess who owns the Wyndham or the New Yorker? See, they named the Empire State Building after the Empire State. Well, they named the New Yorker, one of the first of the big towers, they named it after New York too. They called it the New Yorker. And that's where Tesla was working and had all this information. That's where John Trump got the information. Some say it was time travel. There's some other stuff that John Trump didn't give the government. And so Trump was privy to that. He's got some very powerful information. Because you see, the other side of the world, they were trying to get this information. And the bad side were trying to get the information. Well, the bad side got some of the information, and they've been using it against us, and that's what this thing called Google is. But the good stuff, you see, John Trump took it for himself, because he wasn't taking no chances. And, of course, he gave it to his brother, because he died. And so, Donald Trump's dad had this information. That's how he got very powerful. And, of course, he passed away, and he gave all this information to his son, Donald Trump. And they were influential in politics, and they're obviously working and planning, Donald Trump was, how he could save the world. Because he knows that the other side and what they're doing. So he bought the Empire State Building. Because it was basically like saying, look, this, the king of the world, you know, the guy that owns this building, that gives it to his heir, well, guess what? I bought it. I've got the power to take you guys out. Now, I don't know why he only purchased it for a little while and then sold it again. Perhaps there was information in there that he needed. And once he got it, he didn't need it anymore, and he sold it. Now, after he did that, he went ahead and built the Trump Tower, which again is very, very close to the Wyndham or the New Yorker. Very close. They're practically next door to each other. So, you know, do you really think that Donald Trump's only got $3 billion? I mean, think about how much each one of these buildings are worth. He's got buildings like this in India, everywhere around the world. Hundreds of properties. Buildings that you know, just psychologically or, you know, theoretically, these are the largest buildings in the middle of the capital of the world. He owns the Empire State Building. Whoever owns the Empire State Building rules the world. How do you think he walked into the debate with 16 other Republicans and within just a few weeks takes down the two greatest dynasties in American history, the Clintons and the Bushes? Pretty, you know, just because of his wit? Well, maybe. But like I say, I'm not one for coincidences. And I tell you, you know, obviously he knew he was going to be president because, as we've said before, Nixon said he's going to be president. And Nixon was, this was prophesied by Gene Dixon, right? Who was counseling all the presidents. And Norman Vincent Peale was a Freemason, as we said, a very good man, who was trying to help this country and was worried about its future. Norman Vincent Peale was best friends with Nixon, and Nixon and Norman Vincent Peale were best friends with JFK Jr. and Donald Trump. See, they impeached Nixon because if you go back and read everything that Nixon said, you know, you may not like him. Say, well, I don't like what Nixon did with China. Well, you know what? Nixon wasn't the one doing the stuff with China. That was Kissinger. Nixon was forced to do that stuff. And when he said no, well, guess what they did? He tried to get us out of Vietnam too. And they didn't want, you know, they were telling him what to say and what to do or else they'd kill him. And so he got scared. But then he tried pulling a coup on him, to take back the power that he was elected for. And they had enough money to buy off all the senators and impeach him. So JFK Jr. got together with our president, and with the information that they had been, they had money and power too. So they took their part of the information that they knew about, which they knew would give them the upper hand. But they had to play this very, very carefully, because the bad side had a lot of power. You couldn't tip them off. You couldn't let them know what you were doing. It had to be a long-term plan. So they played their cards just right. They held their hand. They knew they couldn't have a poker face. They had to fool the other side. One of the things they did some years ago was they started buying up the radio stations, because you see, the other side, the liberals, the Soroses and all these people, they were buying up all the media outlets, so they couldn't get the truth out to anybody. So they bought up Fox News eventually, but and they sold off all of their entertainment part of it and just stuck with the news, because they knew that was all that was important. And they bought up the radio stations all around, all the radio stations, and started putting people like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity on the radio waves for 3 hours every day. Thank you very much. And people listened to it for 3 hours. And Rush Limbaugh became more of an influence on politics than Walter Cronkite and CBS News. So they had their ways of getting the word out, getting the message out. But they had to do it slick. They had to do it sly. So there was a reason that Donald Trump bought the Empire State Building. And we can never know for sure. But I believe that whatever was in that New Yorker building that was basically a great, huge pyramid, the shape of it. It was a big, huge, monstrous pyramid. Bigger than the one in Egypt. The Wyndham, the New Yorker is what they call it now. The New Yorker Hotel. And I believe that John Trump was given all of that information, and all of his inventions, and all of his facts and figures and physics and diagrams, and the knowledge that he had received. Yes, I think the government got some of it, and I think that's what we're doing here with this Google thing, but not all of it. Some of it was given and put into the proper hands. So they each had their own piece of the information. It's like a race to the moon type of thing, a race to fight to see who's going to take over the world. Well, there's the good side and the bad side. There always has been. You see, why is that? Well, because, friends, the people that came here from this other planet, Superman from Krypton, who took over the media, right? And Batman, who took over the police department, shines his little spotlight in the air, and when he shines it with his little bat wings up in the air, they come running and do his bidding. He's the billionaire. He's like Bloomberg, that's the billionaire that runs New York City. The bad side. But when they took over the planet, as the Bible says, and all the ancient wisdom, the fallen ones, the angels who fell, forsook their natural place. They, So, when that happened, well, Father Anu, back on Nibiru, he was notified that there was a rebellion. And they sent down some good people, namely Thoth, or some call him Mercury, Ninisida, and some call him Jesus Christ. But he came down, born of a virgin, to give us this great wisdom. He wrote it down in the pyramids, and he taught them to understand who we really are, and give us this spiritual wisdom to free us. Remember, he came in and he walked into the synagogue, and he put a Bible up there on the pulpit, and he looked out into the audience and said this: And he came to preach liberty to those that were bound. That's what he came to do. We were bound by the law. He came to teach freedom and liberty and justice for all. So, so you got these two sides. Well, Jesus, he didn't kill people, so he kind of had a disadvantage. So he told his disciples to teach with love and, put wisdom out and tell the people the truth. The world's not flat, it's round, right? Science, Newton, all these people came and gave us this wisdom. And finally, the light kept getting stronger. Freedom and truth keeps marching on. And the day keeps getting brighter. And so, the dark side, they came along, they murdered all the apostles and the prophets, and they burned all the libraries, and they got rid of all this information and the truth. And then they wrote it down in a symbol. They veiled it, like Moses did. He veiled his face, and he made law. He bound us. He made a contract with us. That's the only way he could get us. We had to sign the contract. So every time we got deceived and we fell for it because we wouldn't accept the love of the truth that we might be saved, well, Jesus was patient and kind, and he says he loves, he's not willing that anyone should perish. He's patient with us. So he sends his prophets from time to time to tell us, listen, people, you got to open up your eyes, wake up, because they're lying to you. So Jesus proclaimed that their father was the devil, that he was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. Well, this keeps on going on down. We had inquisitions and murders and martyrs all the way down. Well, whenever the devil comes up real strong, it's because somebody good's there and you're trying to get rid of him. They always got to get rid of the people that are telling you the truth. They got to do something. So Tesla had this truth, but they couldn't kill him because they wanted his information. So they let him live. But in 1943, they decided it was time to take that information from him. Well, I don't know. You tell me. But I don't think it could be a coincidence that our president was privy to that information. The only person that was given the right to look over that information was a scientist named John Trump. And then, a few years later, Donald Trump becomes what? A billionaire worth only $3 billion? I don't think so. He's got, I think that one building there, the Trump Tower, is probably worth close to that. And you've got the plaza, and he's got the Taj Mahal, and he's got, I don't know. I don't know the names of all of them. They're all called Trump Tower. He's got Trump Towers all around the world. And they're all worth lots and lots and lots and lots of money. And casinos and everything. You know how much they make. And golf courses all around the world, and estates and hotels. And he's president. And he goes in and just somehow, in one foul swoop, takes out two dynasties, the Clintons and the Bushes, with one hand. And now he's been president for 3 years. He's about to take out the deep state and the shadow government. Now, how do you do that? And how do you get all these people like Newt Gingrich on his side that fast? Boom, they were on his side. And then boom, people like Mitt Romney and McCain, they hate him, right? Because, you see, one side was going to take down the other side, and they were going to fight, excuse me, tooth and nail to stop him. Well, I just think it's pretty interesting that Donald Trump owns this building. And I was going to tell you, so who do you suppose owns the Wyndham, the New Yorker building now? This'll get you. Guess who? The Moonies. Ah, yeah. The Unification Church, right? See, this is not what you say. Why would some group of people running around with, you got to shave their heads and wear sheets and stand around in airports? Why would they get so powerful that they ended up starting a new church, a world church? How could this happen? Why would so many people want to join? Well, same with the Jehovah's Witnesses. How do they end up
with these large numbers of people. And how do they end up owning such real estate? The most powerful, these big towers right down there on the most expensive real estate in the world. That's assigned, not purchased. It's assigned. They assigned the Watchtower building to Jehovah's Witnesses. They assigned the United Nations building across the street as another one of their programs, not for world peace, that's a ruse. It's for world control. And the World Council of Churches, they're the ones that are controlling the churches. Not your Bible. Not God. Okay? It's the Rothschilds. So, it's not a coincidence that Donald Trump purchased the Empire State Building and then sold it for some reason. Because it's like saying, look, I own it now. I'm taking over. Okay? And you know what? Now that I bought it, I don't think I like it so much. I'm going to build my own. And he goes down the street and builds a Trump Tower. And across the UN building, he builds Trump Plaza, which is 70 stories. And if you go in there, it says on the, I'm told that if you go on the elevator, it says it has 100 stories or something. I think it's only got 70 some levels. But it's like Donald Trump is saying, look, I own a piece of this. I'm taking over. We are, not Donald, but his corporation or his buddies, those people that have been working to defeat the other side, you know, people like JFK Jr. Remember, he was mysteriously came up missing. His plane went down, and him and his wife, and never seen of again. We don't know if he planned the whole thing and just left town and pretended he's not there anymore, and he's in the background helping Trump, because they were best buddies. They were business partners, and they used to go and sit down there at Mar-a-Lago and drink and well, Trump doesn't drink, but you know, they'd sit down there and plan how they were going to do it, you know, how Trump was going to run for president and stuff like that. They partied with Nixon, and they all sit and plan this, and I don't know how many other people, Huckabee and Gingrich and so many different people came on board, Pompeo and all these people, Flynn, because now some of these people, like the governor of Texas, what was his name? He became Secretary of Energy or something. I forget his name right now. Anyway, they hated Trump. Just hated him because they didn't know who he was. It's like, who is this? I mean, not everybody's informed, right? Not everybody knows what's going on. And once they found out, I mean, once Trump had won, they brought him each one. Remember that? Right after, like a week after he won, he brought all those people into his office. And he said, all right, here's the deal. I won, and now we're going to take back our country. Now, you on board or not? And if you're not, then get the heck out of my office. You're my enemy. But if you're on board, if you're going to be with me, you know, then let's go. Let's make a deal. I'll put you in a position like in my cabinet or whatever, but we got to stick together. And so he did that with the Texas governor and with different ones. And Newt Gingrich and, you know, Huckabee and bunches of them. Ben Carson. And he explained it to him. He said, look, I'm a good guy. We're trying to help. There's all these bad corruption, all this shadow government. We got to take it down. And so some of them were informed as to what was going on. And they said, oh, good. I'm so glad that somebody is got a plan. Let's do it. We got to have one plan. One voice, or we're not going to win. So this is what they're doing. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Donald Trump built the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, right? You know, it was 100 years ago, some guy wrote this book that mentions that President Trump, who would own a big tower on Fifth Avenue, and he'd have a son named Barron, right? All of this stuff has been prophesied years in advance. Too many things have happened. too many coincidences. This is not just a coinky-dink. What's going on in our world right now is destiny, my friends. You know what destiny means? I want to explain something to you. Destiny doesn't mean that somewhere in the beginning of time was all written out for you. What it means is there's a destination that we've got to get to. We've got to get home. And destiny, or your destination, is where you must go. So if you don't believe in destiny, then you don't believe that you actually have a home. You're just a wanderer. See, I for one believe in destiny. There's a master plan. Our Father in heaven knows when every sparrow falls. He knows. He's got a plan. You're not going to let him fall for nothing. That little sparrow's going to come back as an eagle and soar. Our Father loves him and everyone. So, not a coincidence, friend. Something's going on, and you got to take sides. You know, you can't just be ill-informed and just come up with some decision about who you're going to vote for based on whether the guy's got red hair or what color is his skin or anything like that. Look, I'm sure a lot of you would like to vote for someone of color. That would be great. We need representation. But if Rockefeller and the Rothschilds are running the show, then they're just buying people as puppets. See? So, you gotta be really careful. You can't go by any preconceived idea. You gotta have a sling. The only way you can find the truth is to question everything you've ever been told or you've ever believed in. You gotta question it all in order to get to the truth. Be honest and sincere. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. It's getting to be about 53 minutes here, so I hope you guys have a really great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Have a good one.